Dr. Rocco. Today we're going to talk about the neuroscience of stress. So how many of you are stressed out? One, that's it? Come on now. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to talk about is very different, very unique. Please hold any personal questions till the end for HIPAA reasons, but I do like dialogue and conversation, so feel free to ask questions. How familiar is everybody with fight or flight and rest and digest? Yes, a lot. You're good. All right, beautiful. So I don't have to explain that. Awesome. Okay, so then we're going to just move forward and we're going to go from this place for jumping off. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about is a 30,000-foot view of how the body handles and deals with stress. But let's talk about your center, and let's call that peace and ease. Okay, that should be our default operating system. That's where we should operate from all of the time. Okay, we now have started to operate from a stress response all of the time. So how do we augment that, change it, and get out of that stress response? So this is what happens. We're here, and this is peace and ease. The example I like to give everybody is if we're all walking at the zoo, okay, lion gets out of its cage, we are going to leave our center and go into a full-blown stress response in hundreds of milliseconds because there's a lion out of its cage, right? Nobody wants that. Then they catch the lion, they take the lion, they put the lion back in its cage, double bolt the lock, and we go, and we come back to our center and we have a great day eating our ice cream at the zoo. Okay. The issue with today is that theoretical lion doesn't go back in the cage. Family, elections, wars, blah, 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 social media, on, this doesn't get put back in its cage. So we have a lion lurking all of the time. Does that make sense? All right. So we know that center is peace, this is stress. So anything that takes us away from that is a stressor. So the example I'll use now is 32 ounces of a soda. So you drink Coke, 32 ounces. You go into a full-blown stress response for 4 hours before you can come back to here. So the distance between the stress response and peace is how healthy and adaptable you are. The faster you can come back here, the healthy you are, because stress isn't going away. It doesn't matter what you do. You could sell everything you own, go live in the middle of nowhere, and something's still going to try and eat you for dinner, right? Stress response is not leaving us. Does all that make sense? Okay, so how we can adapt to stress, how we can go from the stress response back to center, our adaptability, we have 3 pathways our body uses to do that. I'm going to explain those, and I'm going to explain how we augment them and can enhance them, okay? So the 3 pathways are this. We have the physical pathway, the chemical pathway, and the emotional pathway. Before we get too far down the road, the emotional pathway and the physical pathway do act like chicken and the egg. We will talk about it at the end, okay? But what's most important for this conversation is the physical pathway of how we deal with stress. This is what I work with on a daily basis and change its adaptability, okay? How we handle stress is this. We have our brain and we have our spinal cord, okay? The bones stack up around this. That's what you can feel in your back. Nerve roots come off of this and go everywhere in the body. But our brain and spinal cord are what dictate our response to stress. This is how they do that. Let me get my fancy hair tie out here. So, lion gets out of its cage. Well, let's start with the walking around the zoo. You're walking around the zoo. Your spine is literally like this rubber band, okay? It's doing its thing. The second that lion gets out of its cage, your spine stretches. It's supposed to, it's good, it's wonderful, don't think anything's wrong. The spine stretches. When the spine stretches, it puts you into a fight or flight response, okay? Makes all these other things start to happen in the body. We want it to happen. It's okay. If I'm speaking in front of 150 people like I was 6 weeks ago, I want my spine to do this before I'm on stage, or you're going to be really, really bored while I'm talking, okay? So spine stretches. Lion gets put back in the cage, spine relaxes, okay? You run a marathon, spine stretches. You're done with the marathon, spine relaxes. This is what we want. Now, again, 2024, all of the stressors we have now that we were not meant to deal with, okay? The spine stretches and doesn't go back, and we keep piling the stressors on. So the spine maxes out eventually, and it cannot stretch anymore. A whole bunch of things can happen at this point, but the main one is that your spine starts to twist and turn. Okay? It's called adverse mechanical cord tension. It's fascinating. the spine twists and turns. This matters because this will be the most important thing I draw all day. You have a membrane that surrounds your spine and brain. How many of you are familiar with fascia around the muscles? Okay, think of this like fascia, but it's not fascia. It's just a good representation for your mind of what it's kind of like. Okay, the dura that surrounds it is what it's called. Okay,
How is it called?
the dura, D-U-R-A. Okay, so this dura surrounds this spinal cord and protects it. It's right up against it. When this happens, frictions and sustained, not for a long period of time, sustained stress, friction starts to form and calcifications start to form all along the spinal canal and the cord, okay? These are due to stress because when the spine does this, the body must protect itself. So it starts to tighten and calcify and lock down almost like a brace for you. I will help keep you redlined in first gear in the car, okay? This is what it's doing. We know now through neuroscience research that these start to form by the age of 4 years old due to the stress response in the spine. And they will form like an onion layer on top and just keep developing and keeping us there. What this does is it prevents us from coming all the way back to center. It's like the undercurrent of the ocean has a hint of a stress response to it all of the time. Following me so far? I know this is a lot, okay? We also know that up until 98 years old, they will continue to form, okay? Why 4 and 98? Because it's the youngest and oldest person in the research study, okay? So that's why. Now, this matters for a whole bunch of different reasons. Let's start with the first. You have 86 billion neurons in your brain. Those neurons send signals down the spinal cord, and out the nerve roots. You have nerve roots that come out of the spine, and they talk to every cell, organ, and tissue in your body. This is how you know to blink. This is how you know to sweat. Everything your body does. Your heart beating, everything comes from this. They come out and they talk to every single cell in your body, okay? You have between 36 trillion and 100 trillion cells in your body, okay, that are all under the control of 86 billion neurons. Why does this matter? This matters because every cell in your body is governed by vibration, okay? Your cell will replicate its genetic structure based off of vibration. That matters because your spinal cord itself vibrates at such a specific frequency to who you are as a human, it's a better identifier than your fingerprint. When it starts to torque, twist, and turn, you disrupt the vibrational frequency of potentially 100 trillion cells in your body, okay? When this happens and the cell goes into a stress response, it shuts itself off to the outside environment, okay? If you read, there's a great book called The 1 Minute Cure. At the end of that book, there's an entire chapter about this, okay? When the cell shuts itself off to the outside environment, it's in a stress response now. It does not want things in. That's why these things had to be developed. Because we're living in a world where this is our norm, and to get energy in, we didn't need these 100 years ago. We didn't need a red light therapy bed 100 years ago. 100 years ago, you just went outside and got all the red light from the sun that you needed. But it's not enough now. Why is it not enough? It's not enough because we're living out here in a stress response, and 100 trillion cells are saying, get the F away from me with everything because they're in a stress response. Does this make sense? Okay. What also happens, the genetic code is based off vibration, but how many of you have heard of your telomere? We know what that is. Shorter it ages, the faster you age. Okay. We know that an increase in tension in the spinal cord due to these dural adhesions and the spine's inability to adapt forces a cell into a stress response and makes the telomere age faster than it's supposed to. This is aging. Your aging comes back to how well your spinal cord can communicate to your body 100% of the time. And I'm not talking about aesthetics aging. I'm not talking about Botox and all that. I'm talking about how 100 trillion cells can adapt. Adaptability is the name of the game, okay? You can take a 70-year-old that can adapt, and you can take a 70-year-old that can't. Why? It's because 100 trillion cells were either able to do what they're supposed to or not, okay? So this is how the basis of the body functions, and this is just the cellular portion. We're going to talk about the chemical reaction that starts to happen next. Are we good? Do we have any questions about this part first? Sometimes I can get going fast because it's a lot of information. All right. So, The next wonderful thing, let's use pink. Nah, we'll save that for the emotions. Let's use blue. All right. You have what is called the HPA axis. It's not important, don't worry about it. But it is what happens when the body goes into a stress response. Signals are sent from H to P, down the spine, out the nerve, into the bloodstreams, and all these things, and A starts to do its thing. This is the adrenal gland. How many of you have heard of the adrenal gland? Okay. How many of you have been told you have adrenal fatigue? Yeah, there it is. Okay. So when the body goes into a prolonged state of stress response due to the spine's inability to adapt, the adrenals stay on. Okay? When the adrenals stay on, they pump epinephrine, all the things that we need for adrenaline, which you need if a lion's chasing you. But your body doesn't know the difference between a lion actually chasing you and Fox News putting something on the news channel. There's no difference in your body. Your body actually has no difference between excitement and anxiety. It thinks they're the same thing. It's what you tell yourself. Fascinating. So, adrenals start to pump. They don't get to stop pumping. Now, adrenals have to pull calcium from the bone to try and make more of those. 10, 20, 30, 40 years later, what do we end up with? Osteoporosis, because the adrenals couldn't turn off. Plus all the other things that calcium needs to be pulled from to help balance in the body, right? When this can't turn off and this stays on, it turns into HPA axis dysfunction. That's what it's called. The National Institute of Health did a study, the top 100 diseases in the world. They wanted to know if they shared anything in common. The top 100 most common diseases you went to the doctor for. Wanted to know if they shared anything in common. All 100 are rooted in HPA axis dysfunction. But they didn't go far enough. They're rooted actually in the spine's inability to adapt to the stressor. Okay? That's what's causing these things to happen. Now, this dysfunction sets in, and the magical one turns on. Cortisol. How familiar are you guys with cortisol? Okay. Psychology Today calls it public enemy number one in America. I was reading and listening to a coroner talk, and he said every single disease should have 1A, the name of the disease. 1B, stress, which caused the disease. Okay? This is pretty simple, right? This is how it works. Now, cortisol, when it's sustained in the body, we have the potential to increase heart rate, increase blood pressure, decrease respiration to the lower portion of the lungs because it increases it to short-term breath, right? Increase inflammation in the body. It skyrockets. Inflammation, I'm sure you've been, take 5 minutes on Instagram. Inflammation is what everybody tells you the source of diseases are now, right? Decreases your sex hormones and decreases your immune response. So if you have inflammation skyrocketing, decreased sex hormones, and decreased immune response, doesn't sound like a recipe for success, okay? So if we take cortisol, running rampant in the body, over and over and over again, we take an adrenal gland that can't turn itself off, and we take 100 trillion cells that are in a stress response. This is the breeding ground for thousands of diseases. They have to start somewhere. Does this make sense? Cool. Now we're going to go to the emotional system. It's going to get even more fun. All right. All right, let's do this. We'll use pink. All right. We have, in essence, negative emotions and positive emotions. A fun little side note of a research study they did in South Korea, I think it was last year, maybe a year and a half ago at this point. They took optimistic people and pessimistic people, and they studied their brains. Optimistic people had a younger brain than their biological age and had denser gray matter than pessimistic people. So just simply thinking positive about life increases your longevity. It's fascinating and increases the density of your brain. So just do that and your life will be better, I promise. All right. So here's a fun little tidbit nobody realizes. Your spinal cord actually comes up and anchors all the way up here at your third eye. Okay? They are not separate organs. America made that up. So third eye up here, this is your seat of emotions in the brain. Okay, this is where our emotional system, in essence, resides in this whole area. Again, 30,000-foot view. We also found out that between T1 and T12, So from here to here, that middle part of your back that almost everybody complains about pain, in this part of your spine, you have a more emotional tissue there than your entire brain. This is the source of most of our stress, anxiety, and depression. One of the easiest things to fix, okay? When the spine is being pulled, torqued, and twisted, what happens to the middle part of the back? It gets all twisted up. We pull down on the emotional centers here, okay? Now, what this does is it activates this part of our brain. This is our primitive brain. This lights up when we need to be in survival. This job of this brain is fear and survival. Fight, feed, and fornicate. That's all it cares about, okay? So take the world today. These are not conspiracy theories, just take the world. There's food sold to you on every single corner everywhere you go, right? Violence is sold to you through pretty much every single sport and every single news channel. Sex is condemned through every single major religion, wrapped up in a bow and used to sell you whatever they want to sell you. Because this needs fed. So if we tell you you can't or can have the things, we have you, right? This is why Facebook, Fox, CNN, and all these places pump negative information to you. Because they have neuroscientists on staff that their job is to make sure that you stay in this state, because this state means clicks and eyes and views. If we break this cycle, we don't need that, okay? Does this make sense? So when we start to live here, you cannot be in creativity and thriving at the same time as you are in fear and survival. You will look for the negative. Does this make sense? We all know people who do that, okay? So, what I do, to summarize this part up, I break up these dural adhesions, and I take the spine from a stress response and tight back to this. We rebalance 100 trillion cells. We rebalance the cortisol system in the body. We rebalance the adrenal system, and we bring the brain back online the way it's supposed to. When you take the body out of the stress response, you allow all of this to come back online again, and you start to live in creativity and thriving. We increase adaptability, okay? Does this make sense? So the goal that we're looking for here is this. This will break it down for you. I want to make you more adaptable to everything you want to do in life. And that way that happens is by opening up the brain and spine and giving them more control. Okay? So let's take two different colors here. This is you, and this is your stress. Because everybody wants to know, how do I utilize your services? So this is how. Depends on where you're at in life and what you want to do. Okay? Let's say you are a level 5 person. Okay? And you have a level 3 stress. Boop, boop, boop. Not a big deal. You can handle it, you're good. Level 4 stressor hits and you're like, it's uncomfortable, but I know I can handle it. Level 5 stressor hits and now it's a kind of a shit moment. Like, we don't like the way this feels. A level 6 stressor hits and now we have a problem, right? Now you cannot adapt anymore to the stressor that's happening in your life. The world preaches to you, decrease your stress. This is all they want to do. Okay? Decrease the stress. I'm preaching to you, let's increase your adaptability. Okay? I don't care about your stress level. Every time I touch your spine, we bring the brain and spinal cord to a higher level of organization, and we increase the level of who you are. If we continue to increase the level of who you are, the stress response that you can handle, you can either, I'm a proponent of getting rid of stress. I'm not telling you not to. I think it's great. Don't eat McDonald's every day. Boom, there, we reduced one of the stressors. We can create a bigger gap between the two and make you more adaptable. Or, some of the CEOs I take care of, they want to do this. Boop, 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 boop. This is what we do. But they're in a different phase in life, right? They want to do, they want to build, they want to grow. This is what their nature and desire is. Nothing will ever beat increasing the body's ability to adapt. It will trump and win over the stressor every single time. McDonald's, for instance. Listen, McDonald's, yeah, it's not great for you, but it's the stress and guilt that you feel that is worse for you than the food that you're eating. 100%, right? So this is the name of the game. This happens only when you can take tension off of the spine, right? You take tension off the spine, you increase its adaptability. It controls all. I don't care what we do. Okay, I don't care if we take a medicine, a supplement, whatever. You have 100 million neurons going to your digestive system. Those 100 million neurons can't tell the digestive system what to do. Maybe we're only utilizing 50% of that thing, right? This makes all things work. So hit me with questions. That was a lot in a short amount of time.
You said at the beginning that the spine, we have calcifications, and at the end you say adhesions, or?
Interchanging my words, I apologize for that. It's calcifications, dural adhesions. It's depending on the literature. Yeah.
And,
Sorry.
oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
And when you said that you treat the spine, is like physical therapy?
Physical, yeah. I don't pop or crack. I use an instrument to do everything I need to do. We check the system, we get the system cleared out, and then we watch the system change.
And how many times do you have to do
That's
it?
the beautiful question. The answer is I don't know. I've built a practice off absolutely no website and no marketing material whatsoever. I get very quick results, but it depends. Depends on what the person wants, what they have going on. Like if I had, about 2 months ago, a lady brought to me hearing voices and suicidal. That was a very different care plan than I would imagine your care plan would be, right? Some people are in a place where they're just like, look, I just want to feel good, and we manage that. Other people come to me with Parkinson's. It's very different. There's no way I can answer that until after we adjust you.
Okay.
Yeah. She was next. Okay. Yeah.
So I have two questions. So once you do your manipulation or your work on the spine, if say we don't do anything else,
Sure.
we do just one session, is there a big chance it's gonna go back?
So.
Fast?
So I would encourage, so that's kind of the thing that would, it's a great question. And this is how I answer that, is what I do is not going to go back. You're going to increase your ability to handle stress. And if I bring you, again, let's go, say you're level 5 and I bring you to a level 6, what you're perceiving is going back is you actually increasing your ability to handle stress, so you let more in, 9 times out of 10. Now, I don't know, if you go skiing and you fall off the skis and you flop around on the water, maybe we need to get you, maybe we went backwards. You see what I'm saying? But for the most part, when I adjust you, the brain and spine are adapting to a higher order and reorganizing, and when that happens, we don't go backwards. Does that make sense? We just handle more in life. And then that's when we get into the subconscious, but that's okay.
Now, say I want to be adjusted, and you ask me what's my level of stress, and I tell you, I think it's normal, but recently I realized that we think it's normal because we are used to that.
Yes.
But then internally,
Yes.
our body is much more stressed
Yes.
than we think.
All the time.
Do you see that when you do?
Almost every single day. And then when I'm done, they're like, what? And I'm like, this is how we're supposed to feel, right? Because again, we've made we're supposed to have the peace as our operating system. We've made stress our operating system. So this is our default. Anything happens, we go to stress. We don't automatically go to the peace center. Does that make sense? We need to retrain the neural system to go back to this, to stay in this state. Again, adaptability. Here, when you're here, you can adapt, right? The example I give all the time is my daughter's 7, okay? So when my daughter was first born, if she was here with me, she wouldn't have left my side, okay? Then she's 1, and she'd maybe go up and like play with your hand, and then she'd look and be like, I'm kind of far away from Dad, and she'd come back, right? Now that she's 7, she'd be like 6 rooms away doing her thing, but she knows she can come back because she has increased her adaptability in essence. She has increased her resiliency and knows that she can handle being away from Dad. So the more we get used to this, the more this builds, the farther we can go out there and still come back, right? You can go to McDonald's if you want or on the road trip. It doesn't become the end-all be-all. Or it doesn't become the stressor that tips you over the edge. It does when you're at a 5 and a 5, doesn't when you're at a 2 and a 5. Does that make sense?
Are you local?
I'm here. I will be in this facility probably once a week. Once a week for sure by the end of October. Or August. I got a super busy August, but I'm here today. And then I'm going to try and get back in 2 weeks, and then I'll be here once a week after August.
Always, where are you?
I'm in everywhere. I'm in Delray Beach. That's where my main office is at. I'm in Atlanta once a month, in New York about every 2 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you said you're using equipment or tools to do that? What kind of?
Yeah, it's a little instrument that creates a 64 hertz frequency vibration. So I'm accounting for the bone being out of position in alignment, because that matters. That does matter. But aberrant neural tissue that isn't firing right fires at 64 hertz frequency. But you can't just put 64 hertz frequency in. It has to be at the right torque, angle, and vector. This gets very in detail about that. So that's what the instrument does. In short, again, 30,000 foot view, I'm breaking up the calcifications. We're allowing the spine to go back to the way it was supposed to be designed so that it's pliable, movable, and adaptable.
So in one session, you can break some, all, or part, or
Yeah, it just depends on where you're at, right? Like, I mean, again, between 1 and 4 visits, I get really good results, right? And then it's where first visit's about 45 minutes ish. The first visit, we talk a lot more about like what's going on with you specifically. Some people really need to open up, things like that. From there, each visit's 30 minutes. After that,
So a person with scoliosis,
yeah,
how do you
sure.
do that?
Yeah.
Determine-
So, do you have scoliosis, or do you? Okay. So here's the deal. We can't answer that question. Don't answer that question. Scoliosis is 95% of the time emotional. I can track almost every single person's scoliosis back to the event that happened that caused the spine to torque and twist, which is exactly what we're talking about, right? So when we take the torquing and twisting away, the body has one of two options. It can restore itself back to the normality of the straight spine or not. But what we see happen more often than not is no matter which way the body chooses, the symptoms that have been being created dissipate. Does that make sense? Because you can have a spine that's completely curved, but have no symptomology and the body can adapt. And remember, the name of the game is adaptation, not fix the scoliosis. Fix the scoliosis is much like stepping on the tail of a dog and the dog barking. Take the foot off the tail. But when you can't see it or know what's happening, you muzzle the dog, you inject the dog, you tape the dog. We've created $1 trillion industry in this country treating the bark and ignoring the foot on the tail. I'm taking the foot off the tail. Why? Because the foot has no symptoms associated with it, so it's hard to find. These adhesions have no symptoms associated with the spot of the adhesion. Does that make sense? All the other things we talked about are all the myriad of symptoms that start to happen and take place when the spine's under tension and load like that. Does that make sense? So the goal is not to straight the scoliosis. The goal is to fix the problem that caused the scoliosis and allow the body to adapt in whatever manner it decides fit.
But if that's emotional or psychological, how you must a chiropractor can do that?
Because your emotional system is tied, your emotional system is locked in to the spinal cord, right? So if you have the brain and you have the spinal cord, right? And the emotional system is locked into here, and the spine comes up and anchors at the top part of the emotional system here. I don't care how much we talk about our feelings. If your feelings are being pulled, torqued, and twisted and choked off at their source, you're not going to be able to balance them. When I take the tension off and I take you away from this into this, you can reside back into peace, and now you can go towards your emotional thing in a different manner, right? So I've taken care of a number of people who have been raped, okay? So when they're in a stress response because of the trauma of the rape, doesn't matter how much we're going to talk about it, but if I can just get you out of that stress response for 45 minutes so that your body remembers what it feels like, and then we can talk to somebody through our things in that lens, now we can create the momentum to turn that 45 minutes into an hour and a half. Does that make sense? So instead of fighting against yourself and your own neurology, which you will lose 100% of the time, because the body knows best, let's open it up, let's bring it back to peace, and then let's allow these other modalities to enhance what we do. You get adjusted and you sit in front of these things, it's exponentially more powerful than if you didn't. You get adjusted, you get an IV, it's exponentially more powerful. You get adjusted and you get in a red light bed that's trying to feed 100 trillion cells energy in the mitochondria. Well, if you have 100 trillion cells that are saying, no, I don't want it, it's going to have a lesser effect. Will it get through? 100%. But if I open it up, what happens? Does that make sense to your question? Again, the name of the game is opening the system up, getting it to its center, allowing it to adapt, and then feed it the right things, and you will take off like a rocket.
okay, so every frequency work needs repetitive treatments.
Sure.
Because if our body is in any condition
100%.
and you put yourself in the right environment,
Yep.
then the right environment teaches your body how to relax and be more efficient and
100%.
be able to be in the right place.
Mhm.
Once you get off the frequency, your body keeps staying in that state
Sure.
until it goes back, and everybody's
Sure.
different, until it goes back to default,
Yep.
which most of the pain and the diseases starts from emotional and then develops into physical.
Yep.
And then at some point, even if you're not stressed, the stress is chronic in your body.
Yeah.
So maybe mentally or emotionally, you have nothing to be stressed about. You can go on vacation,
Yeah.
and your body still doesn't know how to adjust back
Yep.
to normal
Because-
it's chronic
because
stress.
of the dural tension though. That's what's not allowing you in this scenario.
Yes.
What's not allowing that person to go back is the fact that the spine is stuck like this. So if your spine's stuck like this and you're in a dural tension stress pattern and the body can't adapt, I can take you from here to Bora Bora, give you a 6-pack of Corona, and you can't figure out why life's not better. Well, it's not better because 100 trillion cells are telling you it's not better. And so, okay,
You need
there's
to repeat and repeat and repeat
So-
and make it actually close to each other, the treatments, to be able to teach your body to stay more in the right frequency instead of this stressful frequency.
possibly yes, right? This is what I tell everybody. I adjust you. I'd like to see you within a window of time that's reasonable to get you back in to see how much change we've made, okay? Some people do need that. Some people don't need that. I tell everybody once a month to once every 6 weeks, you should get checked because this is where it gets real fun. Let's assume that we have no symptoms, okay? Let's assume you're like, I'm great, I got no stress. All right, there's a wave in the brain called the P300 wave. This has been talked about in terms of the state of human performance, okay? Basically, your adaptability can be tied to the P300 wave, much like your HRV. Anybody familiar with HRV? Okay, HRV, it's basically the more adaptable, in short, the more adaptable your heart rate is, the more variable it is, the more adaptable you are to life, okay? So people who wear Oura rings, they monitor their HRV, okay? If we can show that we can increase these two things, we're increasing adaptability of the human being. What we have found is that when you start to monitor stuff like that, if this is your state of human potential and well-being, if we can keep them high, every time post adjustments or post taking the tension pattern off, these waves increase. If that P300 wave in the brain increases, which it does, it's like the S&P 500. Yes, it may dip, like you're saying, but it's not going to dip back to that spot. Then boom, we hit you again, and then it dips again. So your set point is always changing, which is what we talked about here with your level of ability to adapt to stress. So it goes deeper. We're changing the brain at its core. So yes, the people who come to me once a week or once every 2 weeks, especially for the first few months, do exponentially better. But not everybody wants that, so I don't channel people into that. I'm here to meet you where you're at. Like if you're like, hey, I want to come 5 days in a row and blow this thing out of the water, let's do it. I have some people that want to get adjusted once. They get adjusted once, 90% of their symptoms have gone away, and they're like, doc, see if it comes back again. That's okay. I'm not here to tell you, look, let's increase your adaptability so you're, in essence, harder to kill. Not everybody wants that, which is evident when you look around the world, right? So my job is to meet you where you're at. This is why I don't do care plans. I adjust you. You come back for a second visit. I recommend. You do. We see where you're at. 80% better, 60% better, 50% better. My stress level's amazing. Cool. You know?
How are you assessing overall? Is it through like just talk, touch, frequency?
Talk, touch, feel. I have a whole system for that. Yeah, I have a whole system for that. Yeah. What time are we at, guys? Do we know what time we have? Does anybody know the time? 1:43. About 10 more minutes if you guys have any more questions. Anybody in the back have questions? No? Sure.
Can you work on pregnant women?
All the time. And babies.
You need a model right now. I'm not pregnant. I'm just daughter. I have 5 children, but do you need a model to show anything?
No, I don't, but I do. I can't. And to be perfectly honest, pregnant women are that the nerve supply is why the baby's growing, right? I mean, it's what happens. Like, so just in terms of pregnant women, you want to know how smart the human body is? This is insane. So we think we mapped the human genome like 20, 25, 30 years ago, right? So breast milk, this is fascinating. When a child latches to the mother, a solution stronger than peroxide is created between the nipple and the child's mouth. If the husband latches to the mother, nothing happens. Only when the child does it. Then, in hundreds of milliseconds, a signal is sent from the breast to the spine, back up to the brain, where that, in essence, that system analyzes the saliva instantaneously of the child, creates all of the immunoglobulins that that child needs, alters the breast milk instantaneously, and gives the child all of that.
In the next feed.
No, in that feed, right then and there.
Seconds.
Like it'll just alter everything it needs instantly.
Same when the baby is born premature, the milk is going to change according to the
Everything.
needs of the baby.
Yes. There's nothing else on the planet that does that. My goal, right? Now I'm getting goosebumps. My goal, when there's tension on the brain and spinal cord, it chokes that life force off that tells that body to do that. The same system, the same life force that tells the body to alter the breast milk is the same thing that heals you from cancer. It's the same thing that does all the stuff, right? If I drop this, gravity brings it down 100% of the time. You open the brain and spinal cord up, life has to change every single time. It doesn't happen any other way. Does that make sense? Yeah, go ahead.
This is giving me the goosebumps. Well, side note, I breastfed my 5 adult children for 13 years cumulatively, and I know this, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
hello.
Yeah.
But second to that is the spine, I don't know this. I know the teeth are connected to every organ in your body. Is the spine, or different parts of the spine connected also to different organs and
The
places in your body?
spine is connected to every single cell, tissue, and organ in your body. Every tooth, every organ, every cell that makes up every muscle. The spine and brain control all of it. It is up here.
Is it like each like T10 is connected to a certain location?
Correct.
And you know all those locations?
Yeah, and so, but what comes before that location is the tension in the spinal cord. The spinal cord is what then allows the nerves to come out and control T10, L5, wherever it goes. And the body then adapts based off of that. Nothing comes before the brain and spinal cord. That's it. Except you could argue spirituality, but that's, again, I don't work with spirituality. I work with the physical realm that we're in, right? And so that, nothing can come before the brain and spine. Nothing.
I'm just so curious about that because I have an autoimmune condition.
Sure.
I broke my back when I was 15 in high school cheerleading. So my T10, 11, and 12, they took out pieces, put in dead person's bones, and
Yeah.
together with no metal or
Yeah.
plastic or anything. That kind of made me have 0 pain.
Sure. Let's talk about that separate just because of HIPAA. I'm sorry. I don't want to cut you off. Yeah.
I'm just curious where that's connected.
Sure.
I didn't know the back was connected. So that's amazing.
Everything. Yeah. All right. Anything else? Are we good? So I am here for the next few hours. I have patients coming at 2 that I need to see. If you would like to schedule, I have a couple availability. We can figure that out. We can get you to fill out the paperwork on the laptop. If not, I'm sure we have an email system that when I am here full, like once a week, we can get you on that. Just let me know or Taj know how we want to do those things, and we'll go from there. Cool? Thank you guys so much. Yes, you're very welcome.